forever. Let's say afterwards. Hi there, I'm Jimmy Abbott. I'm the priest here at Holy Comfort Episcopal Church. Welcome back to our Bible study. We're calling it That Wonderful and Sacred Mystery. We're talking about the Episcopal Church and sort of all its wonder. So tonight we are doing the history of the Episcopal Church. The Episcopal Church came from England, and so we are starting with how the church began in England, and then we'll work our way to America. We'll take the Mayflower over. Ha 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 ha. That was a joke. Really bad one. But I'm going to begin. What are the most memorable stories about the Episcopal Church that you have heard? Any memorable stories about the Episcopal Church? Okay, crickets.
Other than people drank a lot.
Yeah, that's not. Yeah, I mean.
Is that memorable?
No, I mean, that's a really good point. That's one of the sort of stories that we tell about ourselves or other people tell about us. Mm-hmm. The joke, wherever there are 4 Episcopalians, you'll find a 5th. I'm calling them whiskey palians. It's, yeah, I know. It's sort of like.
It's terrible.
I know. It's sort of like, that's funny. And then at the same time, it's like.
That would be memorable.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And maybe that question isn't on here, but it's what stories do you hear others tell you about the Episcopal Church? And that's one of them is y'all drink a lot.
Well, I had one this last week. There was somebody getting ready to write a letter, and everybody in the group was not Episcopalian, and they said, well, ask her to help you write it. She's the wordy one. They have that extra book and all.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, I mean, what is it like? Most newspapers are written at like a 6th grade level or something like that, and the Book of Common Prayer is at like 11th or 12th grade level. Like, so we're sort of one of the stories we tell about ourselves or others tell us is that we're sort of the intellectual, sort of highbrow. More U.S. presidents have been Episcopalian than any other denomination, and that every president from Monroe to Obama has prayed in St. John's Episcopal Church, Lafayette Square, which is right across from the White House. I had a buddy who was a seminarian who was preaching on a Sunday at that church, and he walked in and the Secret Service was there, and they frisked him down because the president was showing up that morning for Sunday worship, and he said that his sermon had a Joe Biden joke in it, and so he had to like frantically cut that sermon out before he stood up in the pulpit. Kind of funny. And then Rockefeller was an Episcopalian, so that's sort of, the DuPonts were Episcopalians. So we sort of have this sort of.
Is that where we get the money? Because that's one thing I've always, that.
Where do we get all the money?
Associated with us.
So like the church pension group, CPG, they're the ones who really hold my pension. Yeah, I mean, it's this like, it's all old Rockefeller money that's been there since, forever.
Huh.
Mm-hmm.
But then the Presbyterians have their reputation as being more formal, I guess.
I don't know. Yeah.
What I've heard.
I mean, and again, these are stories that we tell about ourselves and we tell about others that don't. Sometimes they're true, sometimes they're not. Yeah, those are just sort of things I hear about the Episcopal Church. And then also you'll hear, well, they're the progressive church. Like, well, that's not really true either. If you sort of look at sort of who we are, I mean, yes, part of it, I guess progressive, but part of it's very traditional. Yeah, I mean, if you say the same prayer since 1662, I mean, you're sort of like, how is that really progressive? Yeah, I
always hear that we don't. Of course, we're the ones who don't like evangelism.
Yeah.
We're always evangelism.
Yep. And we don't read the Bible.
Oh yeah.
We're like,
And
have you been to worship service?
Did you say was in? Didn't you tell us one time on the percentage or how much of the? I mean, because there's a lot of.
Oh yeah, and I forgot what it is, but if you read, if you are in church every Sunday for 3 years, you've read a huge chunk of the Bible, in that sort of 3-year cycle. Not to mention all of our hymns, which are all just scriptural references. And so classic is the show, The Brady Bunch, the maid. What was the maid's name?
Alice?
Yeah, Alice.
Was it Alice?
Lifelong Episcopalian. And after she retired from the show, she sort of started to get more involved in her church, and she went to Bible study all the time. And she said, I had no idea that the Bible quotes the Book of Common Prayer so much. Because you're like, well, it's the other way around. But isn't that funny? Yeah.
Well, I didn't even think about the fact that half the time you're reading the Bible and I want to sing something because what I'm reading, and then it's like, oh, because I remember a song that it goes with, and I didn't really think about it until you said.
Which is genius.
Yes.
That's how you remember the ABCs, right?
Exactly.
Is from song. So I think that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
So those are, some of the stories. And then you also hear, well, it's Diet Catholic or it's Catholic Light. It's, Catholicism without the guilt. You're sort of like, again, stories that are told or we tell about ourselves.
That's true. I did hear that when we got married. It's a lot like the Catholic Church.
Right.
Well, and there have been people I've honestly, that I've described it that way too, because they had some understanding of, Catholicism. I'm like, well, we get told we're the Catholic Light.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Like, okay. Totally unhelpful, but maybe personally helpful.
Yeah.
Then you do the opposite. That's very Protestant.
Right.
Yeah.
So there are 3 stories that I want to sort of go through that describe sort of where we come from in our heritage. And I think all of them help explain sort of our DNA as a church. So the first story is I've entitled, "What Are You Doing Here?" And so what happens is, okay, so we're in England. Let's get this closer to y'all. Here's Europe. Here's Spain, France. I know, it's really terrible. I know, it's awful. And of course, this is England, and this is Ireland. This is the United States. There's Philadelphia. It's important later. Okay, so remember in England, around the time of Jesus, there was no such thing as like the English people. There were all these little pockets of different kinds of people. There were Britons, the Angles and Saxons are sort of, they come and go. There are the Picts, the Welsh. There are all these sort of different types of people there in England. What's that?
Well, what about the Romans?
Yeah. Okay. So then the Romans show up. Julius Caesar is actually the Roman who invades England, and that's in the 40s BC. So he's the one who actually shows up before Jesus. So the Romans are there. All these sort of other people are there. Legend has it that Joseph of Arimathea, he's the guy who helped bury Jesus. Legend has it that he actually goes to England, taking the Holy Grail with him. That's why you get the King Arthur legends and whatnot, because legend is that the Monty Python, all of that comes from that legend that Joseph of Arimathea made it to England. So that's why people look for the Holy Grail in England. So, but in other words, Christianity gets there really, really early. You can see Lucius, who is king of the Britons, becomes a Christian in 156 AD. Again, that's super early. Then you have the first martyr in England. His name was Alban. I'm not quite sure on the date. It was somewhere in there in the beginning of the 4th century. The story of Alban, he was not a Christian, but there was a Christian priest who was fleeing Roman persecution in England. And Alban takes him into his home, sort of is converted to Christianity from this priest. Well, there was something that the priest was wearing these clothes, and that the Romans knew who he was based on his clothes. So the priest and Alban switched clothes, and Alban went into public and was caught and was martyred because they thought he was the priest.
Wow.
Sort of interesting. So he is the first martyr of England. This is why lots of Episcopal churches are named St. Albans. And there's a big cathedral called St. Albans Cathedral outside of London. Of course, every priest who hears that story goes like, "What? That dude didn't have the guts to actually wear the clothes in public, whatever it was." But but in other words, again, Christianity is there very, very early in England. Then in 596, what's happened is some slaves, some Angles, have been taken as slaves, and they show up in Rome. And Pope Gregory is standing there in Rome, and he sees these angles walk by, these other people, and he doesn't know who they are. He goes, "Where are these people?" His assistant, whatever, goes, "Oh, they're angles." And he goes, "Where are they from?" And they're from there. And he goes, "Well, we need to send missionaries there." And so he gets a guy. His name is Augustine. Not the Augustine that you've always heard of. This is another Augustine. Pope Gregory sends Augustine to England to sort of be a missionary, to sort of start Christianity in England. And then he gets there, and of course, what does he find? He finds Christians. It's that sort of, what are you doing here? I came to convert the heathen, but there are already Christians here. And so that's what happens, is that he gets there, and he finds that there's actually already a church in England long before Roman Catholic missionaries show up, which is very, very interesting. But the interesting thing there is that the Christians who are there and the Christians who show up with Augustine have a different church calendar. It's a little bit off. So the issue was Queen Bertha and King Ethelbert kept two different calendars, because King Ethelbert followed the Roman calendar and Queen Bertha followed this calendar. And so that means whatever, Queen Bertha, it was Palm Sunday, and for Ethelbert, it was Easter. And so while he's getting drunk, she has to be fasting. And this caused a rift in the sort of household. And so they had something called the Synod of Whitby in 664 to figure out just exactly when Easter should be.
Wow.
And I think those names are right. I can't remember. But essentially, they pick the date that the Church of Rome uses, and they say, okay, we'll use this date. Isn't that interesting? That their big fight was over when they're going to celebrate Easter.
I thought it had to do with,
No, it does. So, it has to deal with the moon.
Okay,
And they were,
I was like,
right.
crazy.
And they were like using some different judgment based on the moon.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. They just disagreed about the moon.
Right.
Kind of.
Yeah. Or about like what astronomical day they should, start at. So who can, whatever. We would say like, really, that's your big beef? Because we got problems. You got, this. So, but I think that the essence of that story is that Christianity already in England is really, really varied and mixed. That it's not like there is just one church that has always believed the same thing. There are lots of different people here, and they believe lots of different things, and they sort of practice their faith in different ways. So that's what we do here. So you can go, there's a little church in Canterbury called St. Martin's Church. It's the oldest church in the English-speaking world. It's crazy, and it's still like a church. Like, you walk in, they're like, oh, Sunday services are at 9 to 10. They have Sunday school, but it's the oldest active Christian church in the English-speaking world since, the 6th century. It's really cool. Anybody ever been to Canterbury? It's phenomenal. Okay. Any questions so far?
How far away is it from London?
That's a good question. Maggie and I, we took a trip, kind of like pilgrimage. Canterbury Tales, like this is where it comes from. People would take pilgrimages there. We landed in London. It was maybe like an hour drive, something like that.
Oh, it's close.
Yeah, south of London. Yeah, but it's pretty close to like the cliffs of Dover, and that makes sense. Like it's like the closest to France. So if you're gonna hop over the English Channel, you would, Canterbury is like the sort of natural spot. There's in Canterbury Cathedral, there are these steps because it used to be a site of pilgrimage. It still is, but there are stone steps that have been warped by all the thousands of pilgrims who have knelt. It's really, really amazing that even these stones have been changed by the prayers of the people. It's really a very powerful, incredible experience. So if you ever have the chance to go. Okay, next story is what I'm calling Off With Her Head. Okay, so we all heard the story about King Henry VIII, right? And how we've heard this. King Henry VIII started the Church of England because he wanted a divorce, right? And okay, so I'm going to try to debunk that as much as I can. I think what's actually going on is that because of geography, because I mean, England is like the farthest point you can get from Rome in Europe. Because of geography, there had always been an uneasy tension between the Christians in England and the Christians in Rome. There was always, they spoke different languages. It took forever to go back and forth. The English were like, there was already a church here when you showed up, so there's this tension. So William the Conqueror, Battle of Hastings, he shows up in 1066. He actually refuses to pay homage to the Pope. He's like, England's not gonna, bow down to the Pope. Lambeth Palace, it's a big sort of church residence in London. The Pope said, "Don't build it," and they said, "Screw you, we're going to build it." Yeah. And then in the 14th century, Parliament actually said none of our money can go to the Pope. So for a long time, there's been bad blood. There's been really bad blood. Then along comes a guy, King Henry VII. He's got two sons, Arthur and Henry. Okay, y'all sort of know this story a little bit. Arthur marries this chick named Catherine, who is Spanish. That's very important. Arthur dies of tuberculosis. Henry VII actually wanted to marry Catherine, which is super creepy, right? Like marrying your dead son's wife.
Mm.
So Henry says, "All right, son Henry, you two can get married." So she sort of jumped ship over here. Now this is against church law. It's against church law for you to marry your dead brother's wife. The Pope here, Julius II, as you can see, Julius II had granted them a license to get married because it was illegal. So he sort of gives them special dispensation. Henry's not happy, right? We know the story. He doesn't have a male heir. There's sort of angst. So he actually doesn't ask for a divorce. He asks for an annulment, because what he said was, actually, this marriage contravenes church law. There are sort of scriptural references to why you shouldn't do this. So he asked for an annulment. Now, the Pope at that time, Clement VII, sorry, I always have to look down to remember who these people are. Clement VII was giving away annulments. Like, it wasn't a big deal. He had just granted an annulment to Margaret of Scotland up here. So it's not like he's squeamish about doing this. The truth of the matter is that the Emperor of Germany, Charles V, has just invaded Italy and has taken all Italian lands except any lands belonging to the Pope. The Pope at that time had vast amounts of land, and that was how the Pope made his money. Charles V is the uncle to Catherine. Okay, so you can see how we've created a triangle here between England, Germany. Well, it's really like a square. So imagine you're the Pope. Charles V could kick your butt at any second. Are you going to grant an annulment to his niece, thereby really upsetting him? Because that's because he is also related to this royal family, and he wants the alliance with Spain and England.
Is that a Habsburg?
No.
No, it's before that. Yeah. But in other words, the Pope is not going to grant the annulment because he doesn't want to make Charles mad. Which is, duh, you're just not going to do that. If he's about to kick your butt, you're not going to go and,
You're not going to make Spain
upset
mad
his
either.
family. Yeah, and you don't want to make Spain mad either.
Spain's sending a lot of money, and
Right.
if you have any hope,
England doesn't pay a dime. So if you're going to make somebody mad, you make the English mad. You don't make the Spaniards mad or the Germans mad. You make the English mad. And so at that point, what happens is that Parliament comes up with sort of some rules, and there's some things that are said that essentially says the Bishop of Rome, the Pope, has no longer any authority over the church in England. And really, that's all that happens. A few other things. They can start doing the services and reading the Bible in English, and priests can marry. There are a few sort of other things that happen, but really that's about it. And so you can see that's why we are so much like Catholics. That's why we say we're Catholic light or whatever. Because, all these priests, whatever, they didn't change the way they were doing things. All they did was get an English Book of Common Prayer. That's all that really changed for most of them. So that's why we are so close, because all we really said was, we don't want the Pope anymore. So things after that changed, but yeah. Isn't it interesting how this is it's all political. It's all sort of like these medieval politics.
Real quick, I can't figure this out. It was not a legal marriage, but isn't there something, is that not in the Bible? Is that just fictitious where it tells you that
Right, yeah. It's from the Bible, that you're not supposed to do it. And I forgot which.
I guess I got it warped, because I thought it was that because I always thought it was so strange when I was little. I thought it was that you were supposed to take care of your brothers.
Oh, right.
And marry them.
Yeah.
So I had backwards.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not.
So then Henry VIII becomes king, and does he do away with Catherine?
Yes.
Yeah, so Catherine,
Okay.
Off with her head.
it's beheaded, beheaded, divorce, survive, beheaded, divorce, beheaded, divorce, survive. There's a sort of mnemonic device to remembering Henry's. Okay, and I think we have to say, Henry's not a nice dude. He's not a nice dude. But this is really the precipitating event that breaks England from Rome. It would be like, anybody who, it would be like saying the assassination of Franz Duke Ferdinand was what caused World War I. Well, it wasn't. It was a precipitating event. Or I put it in my own life. Maggie didn't marry me because I asked her to, I got down on me and I asked her to marry me. She married me because we had this sort of long history relationship built up, and that there was a precipitating event. I think the same thing happens here. You can see they've been at odds for almost 1,000 years, right? Yeah. And then so then it's like a divorce, right? And they go, screw you. And there's just that precipitating event. The straw that broke the camel's back, all that sort of stuff. Okay, so then you have Henry. Because then, of course, the story gets weirder. It doesn't get any better.
No, it doesn't.
He dies. Then you have Edward, which is his son, Edward VI. But he's a sickly child. He's just a boy. And they're still sort of Protestant. This is probably the most Protestant. He dies. And then you have Mary, Queen of Scots, right?
Catholic.
Yes, she's Catholic. So then England goes all the way back to Catholicism and says, Pope, we love you again. We love the Pope again.
Yeah, she was Catherine's daughter.
Right. Catherine's daughter, because remember, Catherine's from Spain and Spain's Catholic. And she dies. Then we know who comes on board is Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen. And she goes, Pope, screw you. We're back to sort of no longer having a Pope. And then she dies in, I got the number wrong. I think it's 1603. I think I said 1604 the earlier session. Somebody like, no, it's 1603. It's really only under Elizabeth that the Church of England becomes its own sort of thing. And that it really defines itself as, this is what we tell ourselves as Episcopalians, that we are the via media. Have y'all ever heard this? The middle way. So we tell ourselves as Episcopalians that we are the middle way. We didn't go as far Protestant as Martin Luther did in Germany, but we're not as Catholic as the Pope in Rome. So we're this sort of middle way. That we take a little bit from both, and that's what makes this really sort of uneasy tension.
There was a lot of intrigue going on with Mary, Queen of Scots. And
oh yeah, people burn at the stake, and yeah.
But I wonder if part of it was the fact that she was Catholic and nobody else wanted to be Catholic. And
Well,
that's
some
why
people
they
didn't
were-
want to be
Yeah.
Catholic. Oh, yeah, exactly. No, it was a giant mess.
Yeah.
Some people wanted to be Catholic. Some people didn't want to be Catholic. It was really not a sort of. It was not a happy time,
Mhm.
in that.
And she wanted to be Queen of England,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Didn't she?
Right. Yeah. So
Yeah.
she was. Yeah.
She was,
She was.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
she was?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So because she's the one who takes England back to
Catholicism.
Catholicism,
Mhm.
to the Pope.
But then she's imprisoned, isn't she?
No, she dies, right?
She dies.
Wait, didn't you say didn't you say Mary?
Mary.
He's talking about Mary, Queen of Scots.
Oh,
He's talking about Elizabeth.
No,
No,
Mary.
Mary.
But
Mary.
you went down to Elizabeth to say that she was the one who brought the Church
No.
of England back.
Yes, then
Yeah.
she makes it sort of more Protestant again.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think what we have to say is
Okay.
there was a lot going on here.
Yeah.
And imagine you're going back and forth. You're reading the services in English. You're reading the services in Latin. You're sort of
Yeah.
Well, and you got armies all attached to this Bloody Mary, and she's executing people.
oh yeah,
Oh.
exactly.
And they're running up
Yeah.
and down from castle to castle. You know, yeah,
Oh.
it's
But they're also
Real
huge.
mess.
They're
a
huge.
whole mess.
They're these giant peasant uprisings
yeah.
to
Oh,
bring
God.
to bring England back to Catholicism. Like it is a giant mess.
And these groups didn't like each other to start with.
That's
So,
true,
you know,
yeah.
you had all that.
Oh, yeah.
And you remember the Welsh hate the English, and the Scots
Scots
hate
do
the English
too.
well too. So it's like everybody hates each other. So it's a giant mess. Now, of course, we know why Ireland doesn't go Protestant, right? It's because they hate the English, and so they're going to do the opposite of what do the English do.
Yeah.
Screw you. So bad blood all around.
So bad.
So there's I took a class on this in seminary that followed one little parish that's like out here in England, and the priest kept a really good like register, and so it follows what happened all the way through all these people,
Wow.
and the back and the forth and the heartache of the people, and just like, they had a statue of Mary, and then they had to take it away, but somebody hid it, so they're able to bring it back out when Mary came along, and then Elizabeth showed up, and they had to go hide it again. Like, all this back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Yeah. I get really excited about this stuff.
Mhm.
Really, yeah.
Pretty cool.
Mhm.
So then after this, it doesn't actually get any better, because then you have the English Civil War in the middle of the 1600s. This is when Cromwell shows up, and he takes the whole of England to essentially Presbyterian. Then William of Orange, sorry, all these crazy things, he comes back. It's called the Glorious Revolution. They restore the Book of Common Prayer, and in 1662, you finally have a church that is sort of at rest. So imagine in just like 150 years, you have gone from Catholic to Protestant to Catholic to Protestant to Presbyterian
Yeah, wow.
to really sort of Anglican.
And then you have all the people who were like the Puritans, who thought everybody was wrong with this whole drill.
Right.
And they said, we'll just go to the States.
Yes. This is where the Puritans come in, and the Mayflower. They hated all these people. They hated the Presbyterians, they hated the Anglicans, they hated the Catholics. So what did the English do? They kicked them out, and they went to the Netherlands. The Dutch kicked them out, and then they showed up in the United States. So essentially, I think the sort of main theme of all this is that in Anglican, as in Church of England, which is what we are, in the Anglican Church, it's deep in our DNA to disagree and to have different understandings of our faith, because all these people are going all back and forth. I think that's also what makes the Church of England so beautiful and so diverse, is that we've been doing this for like 5-6 centuries. Like, it's okay to disagree. We understand that it's better to pray with one another than to burn one another at the stake. Like, we learned that lesson, and I think we learned it well.
Yeah, we came out of that one.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so
Experience,
I think that's why also when we talk about the Episcopal Church, one of the stories that we tell ourselves is that Democrats and Republicans, gay and straight, Tea Party and socialists can all gather around the same table, because what matters is that we gather around the same table and that we don't kill each other. And I think that's the really beautiful thing about the Episcopal Church, is that it can take in all these sort of different types of being Episcopalian, because we learned our lesson that this is not how you do it, but this is so now deep in our DNA to have things all over the place. Because we know this, right? I mean, people play comfort. We don't agree about much. I mean, I think that's really beautiful. Okay, any questions on any of that? Or was that way too complex?
No, it's good.
Okay. So that was the story off with her head, essentially the story of the English Reformation, and then our final story tonight is, what do they need bishops for? Now, so what happens is, we know, you pointed out, the Puritans are kicked out of England. This is actually funny. One of the things was that the Puritans didn't want anybody playing the primitive form of soccer on Sundays, and the Church of England didn't care. They got really upset, so the Church of England kicked them out to the Netherlands over soccer. And then the Dutch didn't like them either, as I said, so they get booted back here, and then they hop on the Mayflower and come over here.
1620.
Yeah. Okay. Now, eventually it's not just Puritans, as we know. Remember, one of the stories we tell about ourselves is that Episcopalians are the wealthy, sort of the Rockefellers, the DuPonts, the whatevers. So what you start having is wealthy landowners from England coming over to set up plantations in America. Real plantation, I don't know. And what they bring with them is their church and their prayer book and their sort of way of being Christian. So you get Anglican churches being set up in the United States. Well, it's not the United States yet, it's, the colonies. Now, the interesting thing is, as you see my next bullet point, the Church of England never sends a bishop over here. And that was a way of keeping control on the colonies. Because if you wanted to be a priest, you had to hop on a boat, go over here to England, and essentially get the propaganda and the sort of, they make sure that you're obedient to the king, and then they send you back to the colonies. So you can imagine that. I mean, the power of the priesthood and the pulpit, like that these people now are formed to be obedient to the king. And, one of the stories that we tell ourselves about the American Revolution is, these colonists rise up, they sort of hate the king. The story of our church in America is different. That some priests and some congregations did not want a revolution. They liked the king. They prayed for the king in Parliament every Sunday. They felt this connection, and they didn't want that. And imagine you're a wealthy landowner who is over here. You don't want to take a risk at something new. You want to keep the old system that you're going to be making money off England. So two things happened during the Revolution, and after the Revolution. Some Anglicans here in the United States actually leave and they move to Canada because they feel more at home in Canada, where they can still have the king and Parliament and all that. The ones that stay have to change their name because imagine you've just fought this giant war with England. You don't want to be going to the Church of England. if you're living in Philadelphia, like Constitution Hall is right around the corner. You don't want to be going to something called the Church of England. So they changed their name to the Episcopal Church. And Episcopal is taken from the Greek word for bishop. We looked around, we said, we're a church, we have bishops, we'll be called the Episcopal Church. It was a way of sort of saying, it's the same church, guys, but wink, wink, it's not the Church of England. And all they really changed in the prayer book at first was, rather than praying for the king and parliament, they prayed for the president, the Congress, and the courts. Same church, though. But you can imagine, like, there was some tension there, that not everybody wanted a rebellion.
Well, George Washington was a good example. I mean, he was Episcopalian, if you will. He belonged to the Church of England.
Mhm.
He's fought a revolution against the king. He's probably not going to take an oath of loyalty. Probably not.
Yeah, and keep going to the Church of England. It's like,
Exactly.
you just kind of have this giant war over this, yeah. Now, the interesting thing is we're calling ourselves the Episcopal Church, but we don't have any bishops, right? Because a bishop never made it over here. So, but we need bishops, right, to make more priests. You need priests. And remember, it takes 3 bishops to make 1 bishop. So we're sort of stuck. We're like, what do we do here? So the church in Connecticut gets together, and they elect a guy. His name is Samuel Seabury. You'll see what autocorrect did on my sheet. Named him Samuel Seabird. So Samuel Seabury hops on a boat in the 1780s. He goes over here to England, and he goes, "Hey guys, do you think you would consecrate me a bishop?" No. What do you think the Church of England bishops
Not a
said?
chance.
Yeah, screw you, dude. Like, we just fought this giant war against you, and you're not in obedience to the king, so no. So he's like, whoa, what do I do? Well, remember, the Scottish hate the English. So he hops on a boat, I don't know, wherever Aberdeen is. I don't know which side of the island it's on.
That time.
Okay. So he goes up to Aberdeen, and he's like, hey, Scottish bishops. And they're like, yeah, they said no, we'll totally do it. And so they consecrate him a bishop. And then he comes back, and then the church in America, the Episcopal Church, has its first bishop. And then
why aren't we the Scotch Aliens or something? Sorry.
no, that's a great question. And actually, the Anglican Church, the Church of England in Scotland, calls themselves also the Scottish Episcopal Church for the same reason. They don't.
I meant instead of the whiskey aliens.
Oh yes.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
I was really
I got it.
the
Yeah.
alcohol.
No, I like that.
That's
I like that. That's pretty funny. Eventually, the English lighten up, and a couple more bishops get consecrated. And remember, once you have 3 bishops, you can make a new bishop, and so it sort of populate itself from there. This is why also now in the American Book of Common Prayer, it looks much more like the Scottish Book of Common Prayer than it does the English Book of Common Prayer, because it's sort of to pay homage, to say, hey, Scots, thank you. And also, if you can imagine the Episcopal flag, it's sort of shaped like this. This is red, because that's the cross of St. George, the cross of England. And then this is all blue, and it's got those little crosses. Can you kind of picture that?
Yes.
That's the Scottish cross, the cross of St. Andrew. So it's a way of saying, hey, Church of Scotland, thank you. I just use a lot of kind of crazy words, sort of rambled on for a little bit. What do I need to clarify?
One thing that I've wondered about, I know that there's been some breakaway Episcopalians, and they go to what they call the Anglican Church.
Yeah.
So they're in direct line with Canterbury. Is that what it is, or is that just a play on
Okay,
words?
so yes, it is. Because up until people really start breaking away, we can call ourselves Anglicans. The word Anglican comes from this word, angles. and it's really come to mean just English, like Anglo, all that.
Yeah.
So the Anglican Church is just like it's the Church of England.
Mhm.
And so since we are members of that worldwide body, we can call ourselves Anglicans. I think the reason now churches that break away are calling themselves Anglican is essentially the reversal of why we started calling ourselves Episcopalian, is that they want to differentiate from us.
Oh, that's a deal. Okay.
And we'll talk about that in these sessions about
Yeah.
why that's happening and sort of how that has played out and will play out. No, that's a really good question though. And so, people say, well, I'm an Anglican. Well, so am I.
Right. Yeah.
I'm an Episcopalian, I'm an Anglican. That's who we are.
Mhm.
When did the Anglican communion come into this?
That's a great question. Okay, so then essentially anywhere where there was an English colony, there was a Church of England. So there are churches in Scotland, New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, all throughout East and West Africa as well. What happens is at the end of the 19th century, they sort of start to understand ourselves as a larger global body. And that's when the Archbishop of Canterbury really becomes the head of the Anglican Communion. And that's,
And that's going directly to the, when the British flag never set.
right. The
Yeah.
British
Sun
flag
never
never set
set.
on the, or the sun never set on the
British Empire.
Yeah, exactly. So same sort of idea.
It's basically where it came from.
Right, exactly. And so if there's any remaining vestige of the British Empire, it's us. I mean, and really you
That's
think
right.
the sun never sets on the Anglican Communion when you think about sort of all the different places it is in the world. So that really comes up in the 19th century when we sort of start seeing ourselves. And what happens is about every 10 years, the head bishop from all those different places in the world go to England for a meeting with the Archbishop of Canterbury.
In reference to its origins.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And this sort of common heritage that we all now share, the heritage of the Book of Common Prayer and sort of the heritage of this crazy, back and forthness. So I think the sort of other lesson from this story is, again, understanding that there's great diversity in the Episcopal Church. Some Episcopalians wish they had the king back. Some Episcopalians fought against the king. But the sense, though, that we are still one church, even though there was vast disagreement, I think is really a beautiful thing. And also, I think there is a great beauty in our, like you said, our kinship with all these other churches around the world. I know that was a lot. I'm really sorry. I hope I didn't overwhelm.
Anglican instead of Roman.
Yeah, I mean, so it's the Church of England, it's the Church of Rome, it's the church, right? I mean, it's sort of, we worship Jesus, like it's, it's just sort of different ways of doing that. Okay. Are you sure?
It's about the work
Yeah, exactly.
and the way we choose.
Now, it shouldn't surprise you that I'm the historian for the Diocese of Texas. So if you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to ask, which is really pretty sad. Okay, if you could open up your Bibles then to the Gospel of Luke. So we've talked a lot about stories and the stories we tell ourselves. Luke, it's right before John, right after Matthew and Mark. We found Luke. Luke chapter 1, verses 1 through 4. this is how Luke begins his gospel. Will somebody read that?
Many people have attempted to write about the things that have taken place among us. Reports of these things were handed down to us. There were people who saw these things for themselves from the beginning and then passed the word on. I myself have carefully looked into everything from the beginning, so it seemed good also to me to write down an orderly report of exactly what happened. I'm doing this for you, most excellent Theophilus. I want you to know that the things you have been taught are true.
Thank you. So I like how Luke is saying, I'm a historian and I'm going to tell this story, just as I sort of shared the story tonight. My question is then, if you were going to set down an account of your own life with Christ, who would you write that letter to? What would be the main themes? What would be the highlights? What would you not put in? I know those are heavy questions. In understanding that our lives are not perfect, the history of the church is not perfect. But understanding then, like, what stories don't you tell about yourself?
Oh, I'd probably not. You write it to someone that has been deceased, or I mean, considering that, you know, maybe that person is in heaven. I'd probably do that with my father. The last words my father said on his deathbed were, I wasn't there, said, "Tell Gene to go to church." So I thought, wow, that's pretty heavy. He's telling me that before he died, you know.
Wow.
So I'd probably write and say, yeah, I took your advice.
Right.
You know?
And then, so here's the story. Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't exactly take
Yeah.
his advice
Well,
until you were led. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway, I'm here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Those are the things you left out.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what you're supposed to
Yeah.
tell.
Things you left out.
Right.
We got to that point. You'd put in the things that you would help to grow the church and leave out those that possibly would not. As to who would you write it to?
Yeah. I mean, I think I'd write it to my daughter, and that sort of, so that she knew who I was and why I had chosen this and where I come from.
Your heritage.
Right.
Yeah. Sons. Yeah.
Yeah. Any main themes that would pop up? In your life with Christ?
The highlights, the high points.
Yeah.
I'd say it's real. Very real. Okay.
How it was always there, even when you didn't think so. When you look back,
Yeah.
when you had hindsight,
Yeah.
see where
Where it was going.
I think there would be things that I would downplay. I don't really think are the doubts that I've ever encountered and still encounter, but more of the anger. I think the sort of, you know, the anger against God, or just the sort of average anger I feel. I think I would try to downplay that in anything that I wrote.
And I agree with downplay, because when you say what would you not record, I think not recording it is not the ideal, because of the fact that it's in some of those things that weren't the best moments of your life, that may help somebody else to see something valuable.
Yeah. Just because I went down this path and it was not the right path, it doesn't mean that all hope was lost.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's what you value more than the other.
Well, you were saying the doubts, and I think sometimes it's important to know that other people
Mhm.
did question things, or did wonder, well, where was God in
Mhm.
this? And then they found out later,
Mhm.
maybe, where he was.
Oh, yeah.
What is it with history that even, let's say with the presidents, blah, 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 and then history proves
Mhm.
one way or another or different?
Mhm. It is that sort of great equalizer that once somebody's dead, once you're dead, you can't really communicate it, and then we get to take that step back and sort of judge that person. And I think that's part of this sort of spiritual exercise of writing these things down, so that you do have something to say about yourself. So my exhortation to y'all would be to take some time and write your spiritual autobiography. And if it's in the form of a letter or like a memoir, take some time, think about it, and sort of talk about your life with Christ and what that's been like. I found I had to do that before seminary, and it was a really fruitful experience, because then you write it and then you go back and you read over it. Sometimes when you're writing, things just sort of come out, and then it's good to go back over it and go, oh, there could be some revelations in there.
Or sometimes even in speaking it,
Mm-hmm.
you hear yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
It is an interesting drill, because I did it for EFM this year.
Mm-hmm.
And when you try to get it, you're going to present it in 10 minutes. Now, what would you say to someone in 10 minutes about your life with Christ? And that's really hard, because you start out with this giant thing that you keep trying to keep the critical parts right. And it is very revealing, very interesting what you choose to take out, what you choose to leave in.
And then I think the reverse happened, then people choose to tell stories about you, and they choose to leave out some stories. And then what does that say? So just as we go through these two sessions this week and next week, talking about the history of the church, think about your own history as well. I think history at its best helps us imagine our own stories and where we come from. So if you forget who Catherine was, that's totally fine. But my hope is that from this evening, you come away and you start asking yourself, well, what are the stories I tell about myself? And what are the stories that I want others to know about my life with Jesus? Okay, well, thank you all for joining us. And thank you, my viewers and listeners. Hi, Mom. It's good to, I don't see you actually. So, but thank you. Any questions, you can email them to me at jimmy@holycomforterspring.org. I would love to hear from you.